What's going on, everyone? It's Caitlin Lyle,
And Blake Palmquist.
your co-hosts and co-chairs of the Athletes for Hope Athlete Mental Health Alliance, and welcome to our podcast, Whole Being Athlete Talks.
AMHA is a committee consisting of, but not limited to, Olympic, Paralympic, collegiate, and retired athletes who are passionate about advocating for mental health in athletics.
This alliance aims to leverage the lived experiences and amplify the voices of athletes and the different intersections they face within mental health.
We'll be discussing some sensitive topics, so please take care of yourself while listening and just take a step back for yourself if you need any.
We're super happy that you're here, and we're grateful that you are here listening and working on yourself and growing. So let's just dive right into the conversation. Today, we are lucky to be joined with Jenny Sichel, a Paralympic rower with an absolutely outstanding career. She won the silver medal at the 2016 Paralympic Games. She's a 7-time U.S. rowing paranational team member, a 4-time world rowing silver medalist, and a 2021 Paralympic coach. What a career Jenny has had.
As a person with a mental health disability, Jenny has felt stigmatized and discriminated against for what she viewed to be her superpower. With navigating mental health challenges firsthand, she strives to cultivate a society where mental health is destigmatized so people can feel comfortable speaking out about their struggles and get the support they may need. Thank you so much, Jenny, for being here today. So let's get this conversation going.
Hi, everyone. We are here today with Jenny. She's an amazing athlete and an amazing human being. So we're so happy to have her here. Could you please explain a little bit about yourself, your background, your story?
Yeah, definitely. So hello, everyone. My name is Jenny Sichel, and I am a 2016 Paralympian. I won a silver medal in the sport of rowing. I'm also a 7-time U.S. rowing national team member on the para side of the sport, and have coached at the 2021 Paralympic Games for a PR1 athlete, which, if you know anything about rowing, or even if you don't, it's using your arms and shoulders, basically, to move a massive boat. So super fun. And I also, outside of rowing, I do currently still cox. I retired from international competition in 2019, but I still do belong to a boathouse, captain of my team, that sort of thing, as a coxswain. And so I'm also really good at telling people what to do. But that's besides the point. So I do work for a full-time position as operations director at the National Council on Independent Living, and I'm also a part of an indie improv group. So like to do a lot of things and keep myself busy. And part of the reason we're here is I identify as a person with a mental health disability. So I think that's also part of the reason why we're chatting today in the first place. So that's kind of important too.
Yes, awesome. And I didn't know about the indie. That's so fun and awesome. I'm happy
I love it.
You found something you love outside of sport. I think that's super important.
Yeah.
But speaking of sports and mental health, today you brought us the topic of the culture of mental health in team sports. So tell us a little bit about why you think that's an important topic to bring to the table and what kind of attitudes and beliefs there are about mental health in team sports.
This is so loaded and such a massive question all at once. I love it.
Sorry, sometimes I just ramble, but
no, it's okay. It's like there's so many different aspects to it. Let me start a little bit first with my story, and because that kind of provides context for why I am discussing this the way I am. Mm-hmm. So basically, I was misdiagnosed for 11 years with my mental health disability. And then finally in college, my sophomore year of college, was diagnosed with severe OCD. I say that because my freshman year of college, I started rowing in my freshman year of college. And I was also the quote unquote weird one in my dorm and in my hall. And it just wasn't a very welcoming environment in any way, shape, or form. And I didn't know what was going on. Because I was like, I think this is what it is. Okay, like, what's going on? And then to add on to that, the intensity of collegiate sport just kind of, I wouldn't say I spiraled, but my OCD kicked into high gear. at that point. And so in sophomore year, I was finally like, Mom, Dad, I need to get help. And at this point, it was like, I'm aging myself here, but it was like 2007. So mental health wasn't even really starting, like maybe starting to be discussed a little bit, but wasn't even like a thing at that time. It was so stigmatized, especially at the university level and on my sports. Like, I actually didn't even go to anyone on campus because I didn't want to have that stigma follow me around campus. So I went to an off-campus provider for my treatments and went to an off-campus psychiatrist. And it was just kind of like something that I was like, okay, I have to get through this. Like, I can get through this. I'm going to stick with rowing, like, see how much I can do, that kind of thing. And at that pretty much same exact time that year, I actually injured myself rowing. And so I not only had this whole like mental health disability thing that I was struggling with, but I also had the injury aspect to the point where I couldn't go back in as a rower to the team. So I ended up painting like all the oars in the boathouse while I was trying to recover my physical injury. And it was very much though, like nobody ever checked in on me. Nobody was ever like, hey, how are you doing? It was like, oh, Jenny's small enough. She can go cox. She can go like hop in a boat, which I also wanted to do. But there wasn't that like team culture of, oh, let me see how Jenny's doing today. Or even just physical injury wise. And then kind of layered on top of that was the fact that like, you know, I'm walking the same exact path to class every single day. I refused to go to the library because I would touch a book that somebody else had touched. And so it's like just things like that that made my collegiate athletic career so challenging. Even though like you think of team sports as such a team environment, but there was nothing there supporting me as far as the mental health aspect goes. You know, there were trainers for if I sprained an ankle or when I hurt my back, but there was never anything that was like present that was going to tell me, hey, this is okay. You can still succeed with struggling with your mental health. Or, hey, you need to take a step back, maybe take time to focus on yourself. It was me just saying that old school mentality of suck it up, you'll be fine, you'll figure it out, which worked for me. But I could only imagine what that would be like, what it would be like if I actually had the support at the time that I so yearned for. From my teammates, from my coach, it just seemed like it was always like, you know, these like, hey, you can perform. You got to perform on the water. You got to do this. You got to do that better. But it was never like, hey, are you doing all right? Or like, hey, how are you liking coxing? Like, do you enjoy it? Blah, blah, blah. Either way, it was very self-motivated rather than external kind of, I keep using support, but that's like the best way to put it. So that's kind of what got me started into that whole collegiate experience got me started into wanting to really look at the team culture of mental health. Because I think it is such an important aspect to a team, yet it's so rarely looked at or even acknowledged. And I think that it's coming into light now. It's sort of having its heyday. A kind of mental health awareness, especially in sports, kind of reminds me of where the women's sports movement was way back when. It was like, oh, women can't do sports. Even the Paralympic movement. Like, oh, people with disabilities, I mean, in rowing specific, people with disabilities can't row 2,000 meters. And then it's like, oh, no, wait, actually they can. Maybe we should talk about this more. Maybe we should allow them to row 2,000 meters. And that kind of seems like where mental health is right now, is like people with mental, like you can't be an athlete and have mental health challenges or disabilities or something like that. You have to be strong. But now we're starting to realize that actually it's part of sport and athletics. And so bringing that into the team and the culture of the team can only stand to improve the team as an entirety. And each and every athlete and coach on the team as well. So I don't know if that gives you a little bit of like idea of where I'm coming from on this and why I think it's so important. But yeah, I have so much more to say. So I'll let you guys keep asking a couple questions, and I could talk for ages about my story and about this. So go for it, and then I'll chime in.
Yeah, I think that there are so many things that you just addressed that we could probably talk for hours about. But I think it's amazing that you mentioned how people perceive people who have disabilities in sport. I recently watched a video of, I think, a blind individual who also had ADHD or something.
Yeah.
And he was on America's Got Talent and he sung and he was amazing. And like
Mm.
the audience is like cheering and clapping as if it's a surprise that someone with a disability can be amazing at things. And so it's like this culture that we're not really used to of accepting that people who have disabilities can be amazing. And so I think that's cool that you're able to highlight that in your experience or like seeing how that's changed.
Yeah, and I think I mean, you say that, and that was also that sort of mentality that I had pretty much until not that mentality where like, oh my God, people with disabilities can do sports. But looking at my disability as a person with mental health disability, like looking at that, I was too afraid to disclose it to anyone pretty much involved in my athletic career because of that specific view where it's like that stigma associated with disabilities, like, oh, someone with a disability, they're not going to be good at sport, or like, wow, they like made it kind of thing. And it's that same sort of perception in the mental health disability world too. Like, where if I had disclosed that I had a mental health challenge, people would be like, oh, something's wrong with you. You're probably not quite as fit, even if it's internal. Like, they don't externally say this. Internally, they're like, oh, Jenny has mental health disability. That might affect her in her sports on the start line, that kind of thing. She may not be as fit to be in a boat, so I'm going to cut her. And especially when it came to the elite level, like, God forbid I say a word to anybody about this. Even my own teammates, like, I didn't disclose this to my own teammates until probably like 2017 after I'd gone to the games. Because there just wasn't that kind of like team culture and team dynamic around it. And like you said, Kaitlyn, there's just so many misconceptions about disability and sport. And I think that a lot of it stems from the historic perspective of disability. And like people with disabilities went into institutions, or like so many negative kind of things pop up when you talk about history and disability. And so I think a lot of it stems from that and preconceived notions and thoughts. And I think that by really working towards that team mental health culture, you can help to adjust and change those thoughts. So even if it's one team at a time, even if it's one athlete or one coach at a time, like, it starts with one and you build from there. Someone recently said to me, hey, Jenny, like, you can come on this, because I do downhill ski racing too in the winter. And someone was like, oh, you can come on this ski trip with us. And I'm like, I don't have enough money to go. Like, I can't afford a $4,000 ski trip. And she's like, well, if you put 50 cents away every day, you'll probably have $4,000 by next year. And I was like, that's not a bad way to look at it. But it's like, it's that sort of mentality where it's like, if we can change one person's perception on this, like, and influence one person to say, oh yeah, no, she has a mental health disability, or she has a physical disability, or she has a visual impairment, or like visual disability, like whatever we want, like, great, they're athletes and they can perform. And if they can't perform, like, let's chat. But at this point, it's like I'm not gonna go sprain my ankle and be like, yeah, I'm gonna go run a mile, coach. And coach will be like, oh, okay, yeah, sprained ankle, sit out for a week. Doctor says so. But it's like, if I'm like, hey, I'm really depressed right now, like, I'm having a hard time even focusing on practice, coach is gonna be like, you better get help. And then it's like, who knows when you're gonna get back on the team. So I don't know if you guys have experienced that in your sports or anything, but that's kind of like the view. And like, even talking about it now, I really only started talking about it and feeling confident talking about it in 2022. And I started rowing in 2006. And that's because I've accomplished what I've set out to accomplish as a person with a mental health disability. And I want to be able to use that platform to just change the opinions and thoughts of others. And, maybe I'm helping someone on a coach, an athlete, whatever it might be, and one at a time. And just by saying this story, So I'm rambling.
No, it's all good. I think it's so true though. Like, as you mentioned, like historically, so much has changed, but still, and you had mentioned it just as you were speaking. There's all these just general assumptions that just immediately go into people's heads when they hear, oh, disability.
Yeah.
Immediately, it's that term that's identified as an obstacle to success or to perform well.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, assuming is like, it's just another way for somebody to make an excuse for you to not want them to be on the team, or to somehow just keep you away from your own personal success. They may not think of it as that right away or subconsciously, but it's just those assumptions. Again, it's changed, but it is still, like, as you're talking about, it's something that is still in this mental health culture. It is just so present. And, when we talk about it, it's like, there needs to be more awareness. There needs to be more, people standing up for one another, just like you're doing, and realizing that the mental health in athletics, and for everybody in general, it's not just for people who don't have a disability. It's for everybody. It's not just for one category. And I think that's where some of it is still being held up a little bit. It's for everybody, not just in one section.
Yeah. And I think, honestly, even in employment, taking it a step back from athletic specific, even in the employment world, as a director, I would absolutely love to hire someone with any type of disability, because I think that there are so many amazing traits that come along with someone having lived experience with a disability. A lot more creativity sometimes, different ways of thinking, different perspectives. They've had to be activists their entire life and fight for things most of the time. And so it's why would we not want to create a culture of belonging on a team, and a culture of positive mental health for all of those people that maybe some don't have disability level mental health? Maybe some are on the injured list for a little bit, but why is there not that culture in the first place? Because people with disabilities especially can bring so many different aspects that build a team up, and that really enhance a team. Honestly, I don't think I would have gotten to where I've achieved what I've achieved in rowing had I not had my mental health disability. I just don't think I would have. I don't, I have so much resiliency that my disability has taught me. And when I first got shut down in 2011, when I didn't make the team, if I didn't have that resiliency, already formed, I don't know if I would have come back. I have so much creativity and from my disability, because I've had to find other ways to adapt to situations. And if I was, out in a boat and had to come up with a different way to tell somebody how to do something, or a different way to get some of the rowers to do what I wanted, what I was asking, and I didn't have that creativity, I would never have gotten to that point. And so why, I guess my question is, why, who would not want to embrace that sort of everyone's differences and create that positive mental health culture? I just don't see why we wouldn't. What are we so afraid of? Kind of thing.
That's a really important question. What are we afraid of? I think people are afraid of change. and they're afraid of accepting something that they're not used to accepting. And so, like what you were saying, a shift in culture needs to happen. But how can we make that happen when people are so afraid? Do you think that within your teammates, I know you said that they weren't super understanding of what you were going through. Do you think that they were also just afraid of reaching out? Or do you think other things came into play?
I just don't even think they thought twice about it.
Mhm.
I think everybody is often just very, and myself included, are often just very focused on, making the boat or playing the sport. And I think that when that happens, yes, you might have people who are very high achievers, but you also then miss out on that team aspect. And it's also hard because we're going through a lot in college, like every individual. I mean, it's a massive transition in somebody's life. And so, unless that culture is created, it's not probably going to happen because there's just so many other things going on. So it's not like I blame my teammates or anybody for not coming to my rescue or my aid or whatever you want to say. I just think it wasn't a thing.
Mhm.
It just wasn't a thing to be yeah, they'd be like, oh, how's your back doing? Kind of thing. But it wasn't sorry, my light just shut off. But it wasn't just a thing saying, hey, how are you feeling? And I will say, when I went to my teammates, my national team teammates, who this was probably about 10 years later, I want to say 8 to 10 years later. And when I went to them and was like, hey, I have a mental health challenges. And at that point, I didn't even know it was disability. It could be a disability. But I went to them and they were super supportive. And they were super accepting of it. And I was like, wait, you're not going to blacklist me because I have mental health challenges? Because I have OCD? What? So I thought that was really interesting. That even in 10 years span, we've kind of come to different understanding. And now, 7 years after that, whatever it is now, it's oh, okay. We're starting to finally talk about this. And so it's my dream would be, for every team to have coaches and athletes talking about mental health, knowing about mental health, making sure that it's acceptable to say, hey, I'm not feeling so hot today. I need a mental health day. And making sure that a coach says, okay, that's fine. Doesn't blink twice. That'd be amazing. But I think that's still a long time coming. Because there's also money attached to things to this, especially at the collegiate and professional levels. There's a lot of money attached to it. And I think that, anything that might produce less money in the start, eventually making more money because you have a better team, but in the start, maybe you'll drop in revenue, is a major no-no. Or even sponsored athletes, something like that. If they say, hey, I need to take a step back for a couple weeks, their sponsors, I can only imagine their coaches and sponsor would be like, man, red flags. So it's how do we create that culture? And how do we make it, stand out and make it normal, for lack of a better word? And so I think part of that too is something that I'm really passionate about, but, educating people. And I think that a lot of the stigma comes from the unknown. And people's preconceived notions of what mental health is. And what someone that has mental challenges, faces or deals with, or whatever it might be. So how do we educate? I know I've kind of chatted before about this, but how do we educate coaches? How do we educate athletes, teams? And that's all the support systems for an athlete too. I mean, I say coaches, but ADs at colleges, or, administration for national teams. I think that there's so much there that could happen, but there's not even resources. So, I mean, yeah, that's kind of my like 2 cents, but I could go so much more into that topic too.
Oh yeah, no, it's totally the idea again when you're talking about even just the team and coaches environment. Again, it's changed so much, but still, um, it's just still that mentality of push your emotions down and don't be as vulnerable.
Yeah.
And I think for you, would you say that in order to help kind of make that shift into that culture, help educate and just, change the tide, do we need to help people understand how to be more vulnerable, understand their emotions at a young age, and just, how to deal with mental health? Like, are those some
Yeah.
things, or what would your ideas be for changing that culture?
Yeah, I think it's yes and. It's a top down type of thing, but I think it also has to be a bottom up. It has to be, I think, in order to, I mean, and this like in order to shift a culture, you need people at the top saying, "Hey, it's okay." Like giving the okay, giving the approval. And maybe if they aren't quite ready to be vulnerable yet, someone near that level, saying, hey, yeah, this is okay. We need to implement this into our training curriculum. But then you also need the athletes. And like, I'm not sure that like necessarily super young kids would even know about what mental health is, but that's where the top level comes in and the coaches starting to say, hey, mental health is okay. Mental health is good. Mental wellness is good. And then, but like athletes who do know what that is, standing up and saying, hey, uniting as a team. I'm not feeling so hot today, coach. And then teammates backing them up. If it comes to like from that perspective too, if the coach isn't quite necessarily ready to accept that mental health is a thing, I think it can be approached from both sides of the table. And I think that like as athletes, we have to speak up sometimes, which is really scary to do, especially when you're trying to make a team, but especially like retired athletes like myself who aren't necessarily trying to make a team anymore, aren't like, if I'm judged, so be it for having a mental health disability, go ahead and then come talk to me and I'll explain to you exactly like what it is and what I went through and how it made me into a better athlete. But I think like I don't think there's one solution to it. I have a story about how like this past year, one of our national team rowers, para rowers, passed away from addiction and mental health stuff. And it almost like there was very little like kind of motion around it. It was just kind of like, oh, that's sad. And I think that that's very indicative of sort of where we are, especially in the US here, with mental health in sports. There are a couple strong advocates out there saying we need to do something, but we need everyone else backing up the strong advocates and saying, yes, we do. It can't just be one or two people. It needs to be like a grassroots sort of movement, but then also that top down. People at the top saying, hey, we acknowledge this is the thing. Like we acknowledge that we need to do better. And we want to do better. It's not just saying, hey, we're totally in the wrong. Because I think if that's the case, we're all in the wrong surrounding this. But I do think that it's saying, okay, what can we do better to improve? Like you have a training plan. Why don't you have a mental health plan, training plan? Or something like, and I'm just throwing things out there. But yeah, I think it's kind of the both and, yes, and kind of thing when it comes to solution set for this. And I mean, I have strategic plans and ideas of what to do regarding all of that, but that's coming from like more of like a bottom up perspective, because while I have made it to the elite level, I don't necessarily feel like I feel still like an athlete. I don't feel like, and I have a little bit of a platform. It's not a major platform. And so until that becomes a major platform and like has the ability to change things, we all need to band together to create something. So
yeah, you're so right in the sense that it takes way more than what you would think, but I do think that it's important to recognize that each individual who does anything at all is more than doing nothing.
yes.
And so even just us today having this conversation is important. It's making a step in the right direction. So it will take time and it will take a lot of different pieces, but we're here and we're talking about it. This is way further ahead than, 2007 when you said was nothing.
Yeah, I can't even like tell you. I can't even imagine what it would have been like. I remember going like 4:30 in the morning, walking to the bus stop to catch the bus at 5 for practice, and walking out and being like this is just so hard. And I was like by myself on Bryn Mawr's campus, like just being like, I love rowing and I love all of this. And I think that rowing absolutely could have saved my life. But this is just so hard. Like, I feel so alone. And I know I wasn't alone because I'm sure there were other people at the time dealing with it. But it's like, I mean, even on campus, like my senior year of college, when I finally got my mental health under control and kind of knew what was going on, I walk up to my freshman year hall, like, and they were sitting at a table, like just as friends, and there was an open seat. And I go, hey guys, like I haven't chatted with you in a while. You mind if I sit? And they go, all the seats are taken. And it's like, if that doesn't speak volumes to how mental health is perceived, both in and outside of sports, like, and then sports is this like microcosm of performance that I could only imagine magnifies different tropes and stereotypes. So it's like, how do we, I feel like we're going to have to work double time to try to change anything in the sporting world. So yeah, it's intense and I'm very passionate about this just because I've gone through it. I've seen like the ups, the downs, and all the insides of it. And I think that it's often very scary for athletes to talk about because they're afraid of being judged. And there's so much stigma associated with it. That it's just like, yeah, it's hard. And that's not to say that I'm like cured from mental health either. I struggle with this every single hour of every day. It affects me. And it's like, it's not something that's easy. But like I said, it also gives me so many other different characteristics. So yeah, I don't know. It's a thing,
Definitely. Yeah. Well, again, it's as you and Kaitlyn mentioned, it'll still take time. It can't just be fixed overnight. But the fact that we're slowly making our way to helping it become what we want it to be is progress. Even if it's 1% each day, that's progress. We're making it better. But we can't thank you enough for being on here and sharing what you've been through and your experiences. It's going to help a lot of people who are going through it right now, who've been through it. If you could go back to when maybe one of the hardest experiences when you were younger and kind of just give some advice to your younger self, how would you go about that? What would you tell your younger self?
Oh God. There's so many things I would love to tell my younger self. I think the main one is that you know, as an athlete, you often have that singular identity, where if something goes wrong as an athlete, that's your only way of identifying as a human being, is you're an athlete. And if all of a sudden the rug is pulled out from underneath you, just realize that you're more like, there are more things to you. Then, like, yes, being an athlete is a major part of you, but you also have other avenues and other interests and other things going on. And I think that with that mindset and that mentality, and maybe younger Jenny resiliency would have come a little bit easier. You know, I think probably one of my lowest points was in 2012 when I didn't make the Paralympic team and I was lied to by the coach. And, you know, I left the boathouse and was driving to my host family house and started speeding out of the parking lot. And I stopped myself by the end of the driveway, the parking lot, and said, "Whoa, what are you doing?" kind of thing. And it was because I was just absolutely so absurdly devastated and depressed. And, you know, my dreams were ruined. And that was the only way I saw my life going. That was the only thing I saw. And it took me about, like, I would say 2.5, 3 months, 4 months maybe, to realize that, you know, like, I do have other characteristics and other traits. And I think by having that realization that, like, you know, I can do other things, having that realization actually made me a better athlete and made me want to come back to the sport and say, yeah, you know, I do actually love this. While I do define myself as an athlete and a serious one at that, it's not the only thing in my life. So, like, it's not like I'm hanging on a thread by that. It's almost like that growth mindset where it's like, if you, that you learn as an athlete, like, if you take an onion and peel one layer off, you're not going to totally fall and crumble. So I think that's what I would tell myself, actually. Now that we've had this lovely discussion, I would tell myself, keep a growth mindset. If one thing goes wrong, it's not going to totally fall apart. You'll be okay.
I love it. Thank you so much for that advice. I feel like I'm going to use that onion picture as well. Instead of things crumbling, like, you have so many more layers to you. Like, it's okay.
Yeah.
Like separating self from sport. Super
Yes.
important. Yeah.
And I use that in sport too. It's like, it's wild because it's like, you work hard to achieve what you do and what you have achieved. And even if you screw up, like, on the starting line of a major race or something happens, like, you're not going to totally stop a boat. The boat's totally not going to fall apart and crumble beneath you because, you know, I don't know, your mic went out or something. Because you've worked hard to get there versus being born this way, per se. So I think that's what I would tell myself.
Awesome. I love it. Well, thank you for sharing that. We usually finish with 1 or 2 like quick questions at the end.
Okay.
So I'm going to ask you, if you could get dinner with any other athlete, famous, whatever, who would you get dinner with?
Nancy Kerrigan.
Fast, you knew.
So I can tell you a story behind that. I've always wanted to meet Nancy Kerrigan. Because when I was 6 years old, I saw Nancy Kerrigan on TV. And she said that she was 6 when she started figure skating. She was like on an interview for the Olympics or something. And my first thought as a 6-year-old was, I still have a shot. Let me pick up a sport now and I can go to the Olympics. And so I know nothing about her. I know she lives in the Boston area. So Nancy, if you're listening, hit me up. I think she would be amazing. I would also like Billie Jean King. Would be fascinating. Anita France, like, there's so many amazing women pioneers in sports that I would just love. Can I just get like a dinner party going? Can we like make this happen?
Dinner table, Thanksgiving dinner.
Just like a whole dinner table with like female athletes, allies, everybody, and just like have a massive dinner. That'd be
Definitely.
great. All right, Blake, you have anything else to add?
If you could play any other sport, what would it be?
I mean, it can't be one that I already play.
Something so totally new.
I would do sailing, I think.
Oh, awesome.
Ooh.
I kind of know a little bit about sailing, but I would love to race sailboats and get competitive in sailing. I love being on the water and reading the waves and everything like that. And so I think that would be an absolute blast to get into sailing.
Yeah, I feel like that's such a freeing sport,
right?
And still in control at the same time, which is nice. And
it's also like adrenaline producing and like that kind of thing. And I would also love to try goalball, which I don't know if you guys know what that is, but it's a Paralympic sport where basically you're blindfolded and you hurl like balls across the court at each other trying to score. And you know where you are because the ball has a jingle in it. So you know where the ball is. And then you also know where you are on the court because there are tactile kind of things on the ground, bumps on the ground to tell you where you are on the court.
That's awesome.
Kind of like the entire crowd has to be silent and you have to like dive in front of the ball to stop it with your body. And then like you roll it like